All right, welcome back to the final round here at Guardian Games for Modern Mondays. We are Portland Paper. I'm Travis Cooper. I'm hanging out with Ian Lunger, producer extraordinaire. And we have our top table, table number one, is going to be playing for all the marbles, all the store credits. It looks like we are going to have Tim on Red Prison and Custon on Living In. So interesting decks to see go XO being the top ranked matches.
If there's one thing we've learned about Modern, it's that the top decks, it's always just a wild collection of people's favorite things.
Yeah, I thought that was when you just look at MTGO results, I don't necessarily think you see that, but when you look at results for paper tournaments, like the Hunter Burden that recently happened, and just like what we see here every week, there's just a lot more variety of what people play in person, and lots of good pilots will play some, a little bit off meta decks and do really well with it. So like both these players here, those are Living End is like kind of a known quantity, but I feel like Rhinos is the more played Cascade deck by a fair amount. And Red Prison creeps up every now and then, but it's not like putting up huge numbers necessarily.
Man, if Tim knows what this matchup is, this hand is such a snap keep. Tim sitting on 2 Furies in hand, which are just so good. Ooh, interesting. In my mind, the 2 Furies that were in Tim's hand are so good here because you can get them to the yard immediately.
How? You have to have a target, right?
Do you? I don't think you actually need a target.
Is it up to?
Fury. Yeah, I believe you do not need a target for Fury. Check, or I'll look it up. But I'm near positive that you don't need a target for Fury.
Oh, yep, yeah. Don't need a target. It's always good to have these knowledgeable people in chat.
And having 2 Furies in the yard seems pretty decent to dissuade Keston from casting an early Living End.
I don't know about that. You've got a lot of big dudes from Living In that you're cycling, and some of which have hexproof, and Furies are kind of mopey on their own. I mean, I like where you're going with that idea, but I don't think being down 2 cards to then hope that your opponent...
okay, but what are you looking for in this Red Prison deck, Travis? Because that's the difference, right? Like, I don't know if Tim has mainboard Graveyard Hate, sure, but Tim's not winning this matchup without, either some sort of ensnaring bridge draw or Graveyard Hate. Like in my mind, the Fury draw is actually like one of the stronger ways that Tim has of winning this matchup.
I think we'll agree to disagree on that one. I think you want to have Blood Moon be relevant and to be able to cast that. Ensnaring Bridge also obviously good, but yeah, I mean, Living Index more so the Rhinos deck play Blood Moon sometimes, but I feel like you might not always keep a hand that has all of your colors and being able to fetch basics, especially with the Living In version of the Cascade decks.
Hi Enzo. Comment on having really good opening hand. Interesting. So kept a hand based on the fetches. We'll talk about it the next time we play in the top tables, which will be you in the top tables and me maybe making it to the top tables. But yeah,
Ian's getting trolled by his in-boss in chat.
I'm glad you're tuning in, Enzo. That's awesome that you're tuning in.
Yeah, you can always subscribe to make Ian feel less bad about losing to you all the time, too.
So funny. All right, I think we know what Fury does.
I do feel rusty. I feel rusty commentating. I need to, I've been playing a lot, but yeah, gotta do some like practices of like identifying alternate art cards, like what rules text, things like that.
I'm just gonna get a bulk box, Travis, and just start throwing cards in front of you as part of your Rocky card identifying training.
We need the montage for sure.
Take your glasses off and make you identify them really small and blurry too, just by a few pixels of art.
All right, I think this is gonna be really rough for Tim probably at this point. I don't know, once Keston's able to cast a Cascader, I think it's pretty much game over. because you're going to get the Grief that comes back into play. Grief will probably nab a Fury, get Architects, which is going to be able to set up the top of Tim's deck to like do the least amount of harm as possible.
Yep, this is a toughie for sure. Keston's thinking really hard about whether to keep the Boseiju in hand or play it out. I think maybe the calculus there is if Tim had the Blood Moon, it would have seen play that last turn. But, you know, it is nice to keep up the Boseiju just in case Tim rips a Blood Moon off the top here.
I think we're going to force a negation that one.
Yeah, and just a hard cast force a negation here. Don't even need to pitch anything.
And that's exiled, but it's not going to matter in this game. If it does, we'll go out there and mention to the players. Whew. Yeah.
This is actually, so that Grief actually not that great.
Yeah.
As it does put the Fury in the yard. But I understand why Keston would go for it.
And, I mean, I would still, if I could cast the card Living End with the graveyards how they are right now, that's, you know.
Yes. So, had there been 2 Furies in the yard, and this was the board that was, I think Keston would be thinking twice about Living Ending here.
Sure. I mean, I get that, except then Tim is down, like, so many cards. You're down 4 cards in that situation, and Keston can just keep cycling cards and just control the pace of the rest of the game, especially when you're playing Force of Negations, and you're not going to have, like, Tim resolve anything really that matters. So I guess I strongly don't think that is a correct thing to do.
All right, we'll talk about it. We'll talk about it later.
Well, all right, we're going to have some menacing Griefs coming in. Currently at a 3-turn clock.
Tim's in a bit of a tough position given that Keston stacked the top cards of his deck, so probably kind of assuming that those are not going to be great draws and also sitting on 2 lands in hand.
Last one is going to tick up to 4 now, so it's going to take those Griefs out of the picture at some point.
And I could see Tim possibly stabilizing after that as once the Griefs are off the board, Keston's sitting on just a Shardless Agent. Although if there's one thing this Living End deck is good at, it's re-upping.
Yeah. And it's going to re-up right now. The Turtle is such an upgrade for this deck.
Agreed.
Yeah, I just think that makes it makes the Living End deck resilient in a way that it wasn't before. That is like significantly ups the power level of it.
And it's a great threat too.
Yeah. And now the Architect's going to sort of seal the deal for the top of Tim's deck. It is kind of fun to have strong feelings and disagreements between our bright minds in the booth here.
I know it's too bad we could never really test them out though. You know, you just gotta go with it after the fact. All right, so Tim's got, it looks like, some number of relics in the board that are going to be great here. You got to imagine that Keston's thinking, okay, you know, Tim is bringing in relics, and so we're going to see some number of Force of Vigors or Foundation Breakers brought in on Keston's side to kind of combat that. And this is where the match I think really gets interesting is post board when we can actually see decks fight against this living end deck.
Yeah, just I feel so kind of going back on the turtle thing. If one of living in traditionally is kind of bad against counterspell decks, especially if the counterspell deck is able to have like 2 counters. Because if you can, counter the thing and then counter the force of negation, usually that's like a lock. But having the turtle then to be able to like buy back your Stardust agent makes it like you just have to have so many counterspells to deal with that. That pushes its percentages against one of its worst styles of matchups significantly. Plus, you get to play a turtle.
Yeah. A flying turtle, no less. Okay, looks like 2 foundation breakers at least coming in for Keston. I always found boarding with living end to be quite difficult. I imagine that Keston is taking out some number of griefs here, especially with Tim being on the play. Grief is not going to be able to catch out the relic. It actually looks like Keston is looking at taking out some number of force of negations.
It looks like all of the force of negations are out.
I'm a little surprised that force of negation is coming out over some number of griefs. But I haven't played a ton of this game, or of this deck.
You've played Living In though, right? The pre-turtle.
Yes, I've played some Living In pre-turtle.
Yeah, I mean, I can kind of see I like forces if I'm on the draw because being able to force a relic seems important. I can see the argument for boarding them out because most of Tim's like payoff cards on the deck are going to be artifacts, like an Ensnaring Bridge or relics. So if you have cyclers that then can also deal with those cards, I could see that being a judgment call to make, to have more answers to artifacts. And top decking a force is bad if your opponent already has a bridge out, but top decking the artifact disruption is good. Then you make yourself weaker to relic, though. I think that's a big sacrifice you're making with that sideboard decision. I probably play draws. I would say you change how you. I would change how I would sideboard significantly because grief can be so good if you're on the play, but on the draw, pretty medium.
And just super dependent on matchups too. So it looked like Keston did have a subtlety in hand. So collection of lands, a subtlety. Looks like a breeding pool. A workable hand right off the get-go. I'm not sure how I feel about subtlety in this matchup. I don't love subtlety in general.
I think it's good against really specific things. It's very good against Amulet. I don't know what is subtlety targeting that's on the stack from Tim's deck.
I think Keston's trying to catch a Fury if Tim's trying to get a sneaky Fury in the yard. Okay. That's kind of maybe the angle that Keston's going for here.
It looks like we do have the Chalice on 0 from Tim. All right, so it's going to be kind of a slow game, probably cycling until we find an answer to Chalice here.
Another note on the kind of whether to keep the griefs in or take them out. I do think it's interesting that previously most versions of Living End actually played a way to cast grief. They played one filter land that would allow them to cast grief just for value. Whereas most new builds have eschewed that for copies of Odawara and Boseiju.
Okay.
So I think that is kind of another knock against leaving grief in, but a slight knock, but a potential knock nonetheless.
I guess the Sunken Ruins was in the deck too, so you could actually suspend a Living End if it was in your hand, because otherwise you're only playing 3 of them, and it's pretty bad if you draw 2 of them.
Yes.
I've seen Living End lose a lot of games like that, where they're out as a Cascade card, and instead they draw their last Living End.
Yep.
And okay, we're putting up the wall of artifacts. Oh, there's one living end in hand. Ooh.
You know, you don't really feel when you draw just one, you're like, okay, that was gonna happen. It's when you hit the second one, that's where you start to like tense up a little bit. Every draw feels a little nervous. It's kind of like that feeling you got playing Neo Brand, Travis, where every draw could be the Grizzle brand.
And in fact, a lot of times it was. All right. We got another grief. I guess why not pitch the living end to grief if that's a second grief in Keston's hand?
So no subtlety here from Keston. If we're not, maybe we're trying to get the value like subtlety play here. We're gonna leave Keston with this. Man, I don't know. I'm a little surprised we didn't see the subtlety at that point. I guess it can. Okay. All right. I like this. I will say I think that art for subtlety is maybe my favorite art of any of the Evoke elementals.
Yeah. I made a mistake of buying those when they came out. I made a lot of good calls. That was my one bad call for that set. Oh, you see what the draw was there?
Was it another living end?
It was another living end.
Man. But you know, you play for game 3 with this deck. You know, game 2 is a bonus when you're playing living end. So you know, Keston's just kind of got to feel this out, make sure that he gets a good lay of the land as far as all of the hate cards that Tim's playing, and then you can make a really informed sideboard decision for game 3. And yes, of note, of very important note, Keston has no red mana here.
I'd like to see a game 3. I'm definitely rooting for Tim in this one.
I mean, if Keston doesn't hit red mana, I think you're most definitely going to see one. And even if Keston hits red mana here, it's not. I don't think it's looking great.
Also, there is a little gremlin inside of me that likes seeing the fail rate of decks that have like, okay, if these things go wrong, I can't win, or it gets really hard. So I sort of do like seeing Living End occasionally draw all 3.
I felt like when I've played Living End that it's got, I mean, it's a very powerful deck, but I've felt like it has a decent fail rate. Like, higher fail rate than I feel like you get a feeling for when you're playing against it, where it feels like they go off all the time.
Now, that's a lot of deck to go through without seeing a red land. Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. And we continue. Oh, there's the outburst.
But, you know, when you're going to lose, you want to lose big. So, you know, you want to lose with no red mana, your opponent having a chalice and an ensnaring bridge down and a full board. Because you want to save up your good luck for game 3.
I don't know. So Keston just conceded there, but there's a bridge out, so I think Keston had 2 more turns at least. Because there's Chandra, and then assuming the 1/1s could attack, so yeah, maybe slightly premature. But I could see, it did look like the writing was mostly on the wall. All right, curious if there's going to be any changes that were play draw dependent.
Oh boy, man, the fact that the Living End deck at this point is playing some number of Gemstone Caverns, Odawara, Boseiju, and trying to hit all 3 colors. This deck's just gotten, I mean, it was greedy from the get-go, but I feel like it's gotten more greedy.
I mean, I think that's the story of modern mana bases right now, right? You have like Jund decks with Urza's Saga, which is that's like 3.5 colors, kind of, I would say, and yeah, you have 5 color humans. We're seeing just a lot of, and also it's one of those things where you'd think that Blood Moon effects would be good, but then if people are playing a lot of Boseijus, I think the internet, a lot of people think Blood Moon's not great because of Boseiju now. I don't know if I fully agree with that, but yeah.
I think it's so dependent on when Boseiju hits, right? Like in this matchup, for example, if Keston does happen to have a fetch land that can get a forest on turn 1, then that makes Boseiju a live draw. But if you do land a Blood Moon on turn 2 or something as Tim with a Desperate Ritual into Blood Moon, and Keston doesn't have the forest out, then Boseiju's not doing anything anyway.
Do you know what you just did? You summoned Desperate Ritual into Blood Moon into Tim's hand. I don't know if we have the red land. I see a Blast Zone, but I did see Ritual and Blood Moon. You've got some power over there, Ian.
What I really wanted to do was give him a Simian Spirit Guide as well, but those days are gone.
I guess you're pretty disincentivized fetching basics in this Living In deck now with all those mana requirements.
Yeah, I think that you are incentivized to be greedier and just hope to dodge the Blood Moon or have the Force of Negation. Or the Grief. I mean, again, this is where we could see Keston's board decisions coming in. There are times too where you get more often than getting a Force of Negation stranded in hand, you get Grief stranded in hand, has been my experience with this. So that's kind of another interesting wrinkle here. But it doesn't look like Keston has either.
No, yeah, there's one more blue card, but does not look like Force of Negation. Oh boy. Oh boy.
I mean, this is kind of the dream from Tim. Keston could be playing some number of Force of Vigors, although with this build I haven't seen the Titanoth Rex. And normally you do see some number of additional green cards, even though Force of Vigor is kind of rough in general. Okay, Foundation Breaker. Foundation Breaker has been found here. It is, I think, going to be a difficult choice for Keston whether Keston will be even able to cast the Foundation Breaker, which...
Oh, we're thinking Spirebluff Canal, fetch
yeah.
Fetch
okay,
land.
But this fetch cannot get green. So this Blood Moon, I think, is going to be extremely effective.
Well, it might be. What? You can get Breeding Pool if there's another one in the deck.
Right, but the Blood Moon's going to come down this turn.
Yeah.
So I think most of the time this deck plays a basic island still, I believe. So likely we'll see Keston fetching for the basic island. Do you remember offhand if the Sky Turtle might be able to bounce off just a basic island as the color requirement?
Nah, it has...
Or is it only bounce a creature? It might be only it might just be Brazen Borrow and might be kind of like the only out at this point. So should see the fetch.
I mean, this prison deck is doing prisony things.
Yes. Yeah, as expected. Desperate Ritual just massively important here to get the Blood Moon out a turn before Keston can potentially go off in response. Obviously, the Chalice is down as well, but which I suppose would have delayed Keston another turn, as the Foundation Breaker would have to come out this turn.
Ooh, that resolve sort of like, ooh, this is we're gonna have to do some things.
Yeah, Keston probably very aware that there are not too many outs in the deck, but a decent number of cycles to get there, many of which are going to require that exactly one blue source. So it's going to be slow going for Keston, but possibly 2 draws a turn to get there.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's Brazen Borrower, the Blood Moon on Tim's Instep, Foundation Breaker, the Chalice, and then we've got the Cascade spells. So, and it looks like we're going to have the 4.
Oh boy.
Oh Jesus.
That is the that is the triumvirate. The triumvirate of living in hate.
Yeah. Oh, yowzers. Yeah.
This is the sort of setup when you like in this matchup. If you get this setup as the prison player, you're feeling a lot of warm fuzzies.
Okay, went to blow up the relic, so we're starting over here.
I mean, Tim is eventually going to have to find. Okay,
Yeah,
here we go.
We got a thread.
Desperate Ritual into Chandra should be the play here. And that's going to start the clock.
It's a pretty fast clock. I mean, you know, ultimate in a couple turns probably. Yeah.
Yeah, Chandra ult's no joke.
Oh, that Zeldy's a little late.
So, interesting. That is a Shatter Skull smashing. It's just flipped to the other side. So I believe it is potentially a castable card, although in this case it would be pretty silly to cast it. Also, Tim should remember that that land comes into play untapped as there's a Blood Moon out, which is relevant for, or is actually not that relevant because you wouldn't cast the other Chandra in any case.
Yeah, and those Shatter Skull smashings, you're always supposed to be the spell side that is facing out.
If I'm Tim, I'm not playing the Ensnaring Bridge here. I'm saving up spells to just cast for after I Chandra ult. And I'm just putting this on the bottom, honestly, if I'm Tim.
Oh, looks like Tim wanted it on the top. Making some more mana with Chandra.
Yeah,
we're ultimating.
Not gonna get too greedy here. I think play the Blood Moon, Dome Keston for 5.
I'd cast other Chalice on 0 too, but don't need to. That's gonna be a scooperoni.
Tim takes it down on Red Prison. So this is the evening that Red Prison won Modern Mondays.
Boseiju made you.
Blood Moon's still out here doing work.
Yeah.
Blood Moon Furies doing work. I mean, you know, this still a lot of good cards available in Red Prison.
I mean, that was just kind of textbook of like disruptive like artifacts and enchantments there. But which happens when you play a really like polarizing style of deck that's dependent on winning in like, you know, one pretty linear way. But cool matchup to see, and it looks like the Force of Vigors were there. So, yeah, that was a card to draw to.
Yeah, yeah. I'm still a little surprised. I mean, if Keston goes back and watches this, it would be fun to have the conversation about whether the griefs or the Force of Negations are the stronger cards in this matchup. Yeah, fun match to watch.
And I just want to thank everyone for hanging out with us this evening, bearing through those like little bits of technical difficulties we had at the beginning. I think we got everything smoothed out there at the end. Should be pretty smooth sailing for next week. I hope so. We'll see you next week, Monday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time for 4 rounds of Modern Magic here at Guardian Games. We're Portland Paper, and yeah, hope to see everyone next week and have a rad week. We'll leave you with a banger of a tune on the way out.